many big hats.
I want to know where the horse heads that are used in these hats came from.
There is a lot of talk in millinery about how we can make something new and innovative.
They're almost taking the piss.
They're just pushing it a little bit too far. Hello and welcome to an episode of Hatmakers React. My name is Ilona, I'm a milliner based in London, and today I'm joined by Rachel from the YouTube channel Labricaloose to discuss and have a look at the hats from the Kentucky Derby. Hi Rachel, thank you for joining me, and what a fabulous hat you're wearing today. It looks to me very inspired by Cecil Beaton hats, perfect for the races.
Well, thank you so much. It was actually inspired by the aesthetic choices in Tim Burton movies, but I'll take Cecil Beaton.
And I am wearing a rose headband, which if you'd like to purchase, I'll leave a link in the description box below. And from what I understand, roses are a big theme at the Kentucky Derby.
Yes, it's called the Race for the Roses because the horse that wins the Derby is covered in a blanket of roses. So they figure into people's outfits and millinery as a motif.
As we go through lots of the hats today, we'll notice one of the themes is roses. And not only roses, but the bigger the better roses, because of course we are in America. The Kentucky Derby has two featured milliners this year, and they are Christine A. Moore and Jenny Pfannenstiel. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And they both have two very separate, distinctive styles. So Christine's hats are definitely Derby ready. They are big, they've got big flowers, they've got big bows, they have big brims, bright colors, everything that when I think of an American horse race, it's exactly what comes to mind.
Yes, I think that of the two that are featured milliners this year, her style is more of what people are thinking of when they refer to something as a derby hat.
And then Jenny's style is more what I would say ascot appropriate. So it's a little more demure, a little thing that goes on your head, not so much with the big brims, but absolutely exquisite swirls and shapes. And in fact, the image that I've chosen to represent Jenny's work here, it looks to me like it's made out of a swirled buntle mat. A few roses, as we said, roses obviously very important, and a few feather quills as well.
Yes, that's a buntal mat that comes in several different color combinations. I've purchased it in black and white to create a very different style of hat. But you're correct, Jenny Pfannenstiel, her millinery focus is more diversified than Christine Moore's. She has a boutique in Lexington, Kentucky, but she also has a range of different things that she offers. She just acquired one of the two biggest millinery supply companies in the US.
The other thing I noticed with the Derby hats, which is very different to my understanding of the British Ascot racing, is there's a big aspect to DIY hats and novelty hats, and everyone's encouraged to have a go at making a hat themselves. And I actually think personally a hat is a little bit easier to make than a dress, because you can buy some foundations. There's a lot of tutorials online. See my channel, Rachel's channel, and a couple of other of us on YouTube, which I'll link to all our channels in the description box below if you'd like to learn how to make your own hats. And the Kentucky Derby organizers this year have also given us the option of a DIY paper flower fascinator tutorial, which I think looks really, really cute, and I want to give it a go myself.
In the days leading up to the Derby is the Derby Festival. And I know they have a hat bazaar that a lot of milliners will vend at. And then they have these events led by probably these featured milliners and others in making your own hats, not just according to that paper tutorial, but along different themes like make your own fascinator and so forth.
This is a new series. We're trying to figure out a format, and I thought the best thing to do was to spot some themes in the races and have a look at certain hats that fit into these themes. And the first theme is roses, but not only roses, big, giant, massive roses, because we are in America, And this first hat that I've chosen, because it caught my eye, is this big open flowered petal white rose worn at a slant on the lady's head. And I think it looks so elegant.
It's really a fascinating hat to look at and think about structurally how that flower is made. It doesn't appear to be the kind of light, airy silk that more natural flowers that we might make for smaller scale millinery would be created from. It looks like perhaps it's wool felt or plastic or leather because it's so big. And the petals themselves have so much substance to them.
It definitely looks like there's some body in those petals. And in fact, I wonder if it's maybe leather that's been stiffened really, really well on the underside and then maybe given an extra bit of sheen because it's just reflecting that light in such a perfect way. It's so beautiful.
Well done, whoever made this.
Giant red rose. So I think it's not just roses that's the big theme. It's also red roses, from what I understood, looking at all the pictures and reading some articles. Red really is the color for the derby, and this hat is giant. It's even bigger than the last one. I have got no idea how that's attached to the lady's head. It looks like it's really heavy to me. Maybe Rachel, you've got some ideas of how this can attach to the head from a theatrical perspective.
It might be built on a kind of a cap, like this hat that I'm wearing. There's a cap structure that this whole fin is built upon. It may be that nestled under that rose is a similar sort of almost a skull cap that can then be secured either around the back of the occipital bone with an elastic or combs that go into pin curls or something similar.
And she's paired it with a lovely polka dot black and white dress, which really makes that red stand out. The hat is the star of the outfit, but it works still really well with the dress, which is really nice.
And it really draws your focus up to her face. In this image, brim of the hat and the flower is hiding her face. But you can imagine if she's standing up straight, she's becoming the rose, you know?
Here's my last entry for the rose category. This time it's not big, but it's following the American theme of the more the better with just amount of petals. So many petals in orange and hot pink. What a wonderful color combination. And it's the base is this half saucer covering half of the eyesight, which is an interesting choice, but I think it still looks very elegant.
It reminds me of a collection that Philip Treacy released with these saucers on the side of the head like that. Sometimes they're down the way this lady is wearing it, sort of shielding her face from the side. It's a very sophisticated structure of the saucer and flower hat.
It's such an interesting thing for us to look at because we're used to seeing a saucer just maybe worn at a slight angle on someone's head, but this is exaggerated angle and beautifully balanced with the pink and orange.
And the pink really connects to the dress that she's wearing in a lovely way too.
Big hats. So many big hats. I'm not sure I actually really like the giant hats. I'm not sure what you think, Rachel.
I'm torn about them because I feel like from a millinery perspective, sometimes they can be very sophisticated and hearkening back to millinery designs of the turn of the 19th to the 20th century when hats were getting so huge. But sometimes they're almost taking the piss.
They're just pushing it a little bit too far. Like I can see with this particular hat, it's definitely very Gainsborough hat. So Gainsborough hats, these big giant hats made famous in the Victorian times from paintings painted by Gainsborough from previous century. But what the difference here is that this hat doesn't look structurally sound to me. This brim looks like it's not really got a wire in it to hold it up. And it's also covering part of this lady's eyeline. To see the camera, she's having to tilt her head up a bit, which takes away from the grandeur of the decoration of the hat, which is fabulous.
And I'm curious about that decoration. You know, it's described as feathers in the caption, but I feel like I also see some sprays of eucalyptus that have been painted white. The feathers themselves also look like they're not actual feathers, but they are representational feathers created in one of the ways, like I think you've done a video on how to create false feathers from other materials, and I've done one on creating felt feathers from different types of millinery felt.
I think there's some pink quills pointing out, but the eucalyptus that's been spray painted white and the things that look like feathers, I think they're also some kind of greenery bouquet real flower that's been sprayed white as well. That's the bit I like about the hat. As I said, for me, the thing that's not quite there is the crinkled brim at the front.
Agreed.
This is absolutely fabulous, and they all look like they're having a wonderful time together in their matching hats.
I feel like they've used some interesting non-flower millinery materials in creating this trio of hats, because I see something that maybe it's tubular crin, maybe it's strips of trimmings or boning, or I don't know, plastic strapping.
Yes, there's definitely something that looks like it could be quills, but it's a bit too thick to be quills on the central hat.
It's a non-traditional millinery material used in an exciting way.
There is a lot of talk in millinery about how we can make something new and innovative. I usually reach for traditional vintage things. John from JWH Millinery is much better at reinterpreting modern materials. I feel like John could make this hat, and he could probably also pull off wearing this hat.
He would add lights to this hat.
I think you would. Put a sparkle on it. Back to big roses, big brims, big feathers, wonderful mass of yellow and pink with a sweeping white brim. So I think this is a successful example of a giant brim that's firstly been made to look bigger with a crin extension, and secondly, it's got to be wired for it to be holding that shape, and it's holding that shape beautifully.
The thing that draws my eye on this hat, like, yes, it's a beautiful hat at a large scale, and I do love that crin extension on the brim, but the feathers that look like they're bleached and over dyed pheasant feathers are wonderful when you imagine this hat being worn in life and the motion that they would have, as opposed to the flowers, which are sort of a sophisticated pile.
And this is another flower that looks like it's been made not using silk or anything lightweight. It looks like it's really holding its shape. I almost think this kind of looks like it's made out of cardboard, or maybe it's flat felt that's been treated in some way. Either way, it's really beautiful. And if you notice the proportions in this hat, she's kind of got a space next to her head where it's just brim. Then she's got her head, and then she's got the flower, which is the same size as her face, and it's the same size as the brim. Someone's really thought this one through. Category number 3, novelty. This is an interesting category for me. I'm very conflicted because I personally don't like novelty items. However, they are so much fun. This hat must have a name, but I'm choosing to call it A Day at the Races with a Picnic. You've got some utensils, some apples, a mini grater, which looks like one of those graters that you get in a Christmas cracker, and also flowers. We can't not have flowers on a derby hat. It does look like all the things are weighing down the brim a bit, but it doesn't seem to be perturbing the lady wearing it.
Nobody would mistake this for a sophisticated hat, but it's a fun hat.
This one made me chuckle. It's one of those hats that I think you can buy on Etsy, where someone custom embroiders whatever you want on it, which isn't the most sophisticated hat again, but the embroidery made me chuckle. It says, "Hold your horses."
I think she's put together a really great derby outfit here too, because she has a shirt dress. There's an illustration portrait of a horse on the back, and it ties it all together with the hat, the words and the imagery. It's a great look.
We've left the flowers and we've moved on to horses. So previous hat, hold your horses. This hat, literally horse on hat.
I love the idea that this man could have spent a lot of time making this fun hat for himself, or that someone made it for him and he loved it enough to wear it to the Derby.
I want to know how that horse is attached to the brim, because if you use something like a glue gun, which would be actually my first instinct, I don't actually think that would hold on straw very well. Maybe you've got some theatrical insights here.
It's probably very heavy. The ones around the brim, I would question whether perhaps there's some kind of novelty that's sold at the Derby for children that is tiny horses on a tiny track that he could use as trim. And the one that's on the crown, I suspect that it has a flat base, you know, that it's one of those horses that sits on a table as a little whatnot, and that we don't see it just because of the angle of the photograph, but that the base is what's actually making it stand up so straight, because it can't be a plastic horse that the only way that it attaches to the hat are the little tiny hooves. It'd fall over.
Some more horse themed hats. This is clearly a couple's costume.
I want to know where the horse heads that are used in these hats came from, because they look like they are maybe hobby horses. The one on the woman's hat is a unicorn. You know, maybe they came from a Halloween store. Maybe they were masks.
I think the plush one on the left definitely looks like it's one of those hobby horse stick horses. And I think you might be right about the white unicorn. It almost looks like it could be one of those rubber masks or silicone masks or something like that. And she's possibly mounted that to a top hat frame, which is very, very clever.
Yeah, I'd like to see these up close and I'd like to touch them. They look like something that I would be asked to make for a show. So I'm always curious to how other people deal with, you have to put an animal head on a performer's head, or in this case, a derby goer's head.
And how it stays attached as they move as well, because they can't all be standing still all day long.
These have to be well balanced. They can't fall off of their heads, especially because at the Derby, you're snacking, you're drinking, you're walking around and socializing. You can't have your hat falling off all the time.
It's one of the worst things for people who are new to millinery is they might try on a hat and they find it unsteady on their head, and then that puts them off hats for life because they think, oh, every hat is going to be unsteady and fall off, when it just takes just a professional to tell you exactly how it's going to attach to the head and to figure out the balance of it as well. So if in doubt, ask your local milliner. The last round is fascinators, which a lot of people have very strong opinions on. I have in the past not liked fascinators, but I think it's because in the UK, there was a culture for a while of, if you're going to a wedding, you feel like you have to wear a hat, but you don't feel confident enough to wear a full hat. So you go and buy a cheap fascinator that's a little bit of prin and a feather, and it's very factory made, and it doesn't necessarily suit the person wearing it. However, the fascinators that I've spotted at the Derby are really quite stunning. I think they deserve to be called fascinators because they are fascinating. Just like with this first one here, we've already seen someone wearing a side plate saucer thing. This is very similar, but I've termed this a fascinator, whereas the other one I would still call a hat. And the reason I think this is a fascinator is because the base of attachment isn't as big. It creates for a very striking image.
I think this is a good example of a fascinator that my interpretation based on the photograph is that she went to one of the milliners in Lexington, Kentucky with her dress and picked out the elements and had this custom made so that it went together as a look, because the colors in the dress fabric are echoed in the fascinator and in a very conscious way. Like as a milliner, you might not choose to make a white and cream and red hat without this dress being intentionally worn with it.
If we're ignoring the dress, my instinct for a shape like this would have just been make it a black straw. But the cream makes it very daytime. Whereas I think if you'd made it in black, it would look very evening.
It's worth talking about the fact that it's mounted on a headband as well. You know, we've talked a little bit about how hats can sit on heads, especially with the large scale ones, and also that one that was the saucer on the side of the face. In this fascinator, there's no question how it's attached to her head. That's almost a feature.
This is one of those crin veiling and feathers swirled on perhaps a little headband or a little button base or something like that. There's something very well proportioned about this. It's not just a collection of get some feathers, get some crin, smash it together. It somehow suits the size of her face. And it's also, once again, picking up on the pink elements in her dress. So I think this is working very well for this lady.
Yes, this actually, to me, it looks like the kinds of derby hats that are sold in boutiques in Lexington, where you're not having it custom made to match your dress per se, but you know you need a pink hat because you're going to have a dress with a pink element in the print. And it's really well executed.
I think when you purchase an off-the-rack hat, I think it speaks to the success of the design where it doesn't look like it's an off-the-rack hat. It's so well matched to what you're wearing already, and you didn't have to commission it. That's a very successful hat model. And to wrap up, I wanted to have a look at the stunning array of popular colors this year. Obviously, I think red is kind of the traditional derby color with the red roses and things. However, when I was looking through various pictures, the trio of colors that really stood out were hot pink, bright orange, and turquoise. They all come together in this lady's wonderful hat.
This is really a spectacular bouquet of feathers. I think these are dyed rooster feathers. They do bring together a lot of the colors that I was seeing in other hats that were featured. I can't see what she's wearing with this.
I think it's just a pink halter neck dress. I think it's matching the pink in the feathers.
Oh, I'd love to see the rest of the outfit, whether the other colors in the hat come in elsewhere, maybe in the shoes.
What I'll do is I'll leave all the links to the various sources where I got all of these images from in the description box below. And Rachel, you can have a look, and so can everyone else.
Excellent.
And while you're having a look at all the links in the description box, please consider liking and subscribing. This really helps me grow and reach a larger audience. And I'd really like to thank Rachel for joining me today on Hatmakers React, and I hope you'll come again. Where can we find you?
You can find me on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter.
If you'd like to see more of my work, you can follow me on Instagram at Ilona Millinery. Thank you so much for joining us. See you next time. Bye.
So he's interested in learning about derby millinery.
Oh, he looks so cute. Drusilla, come say hello to cousin Riley.
Look, Riley, there's a kitty.